Imagine standing in a vast library where every book, every scroll, every iota of knowledge ever accumulated is at your fingertips. You can pick any book, any page, and learn almost anything you want. Sounds like a dream, right? But imagine another twist. You only have one day to read every single book you think you might need to know in the future. Impossible? Well, that's the world we live in. There's so much information and so little direction. How do we make choices in a world that seems to demand absolutely everything from us? Today we're going to talk about Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher whose ideas feel especially relevant in our information-saturated lives. Kierkegaard believed that knowledge alone doesn't lead to meaning. He taught that true understanding requires more than facts. It requires perception, commitment, and believe it or not, passion. Let's explore what it means and why it matters with some help from the ancient Greeks as well. So let's start with perception. Kierkegaard thought that perception wasn't just about looking at the world, it's about seeing beyond that surface, interpreting what we observe, and making it actually personal. You can think of perception as the lens through which you view the world, and this is different from actually knowing the world itself. Knowing is just gathering the facts, but perceiving involves internalizing them and connecting them to what we inherently value. Now, Plato, with whom you might be familiar, had a very similar concept with his theory of forms. Plato thought that everything in our world, from every tree, every sunset, every idea, has an ideal form that exists in a higher and unchanging reality. These forms are perfect, and what we see in this world are merely the shadows of that perfection. They are the representations of them. Kierkegaard wasn't directly building on Plato, but the ideas do resonate. For Kierkegaard, we see through the world to what's important. To perceive deeply is to get a glimpse of what's real and what's worth actually valuing. But perception alone is not enough. You can perceive endlessly and still make no progress. That's where the commitment concept comes in. In a world where every possibility seems open, commitment is really terrifying. What if we commit to something and it's wrong? Kierkegaard was familiar with this fear. He believed that commitment to an idea or belief was essential, although risky. Imagine if Plato's philosopher didn't just look at the forms, but decided to pursue the ideal form of just one thing, like justice or truth, wholeheartedly. That's what commitment looks like. In Kierkegaard's terms, to commit is to step out of the endless spirit of what if, and say, this is the direction that I am going to take. But there is a catch. It requires letting go of all those other paths. And let's bring in the Greeks again, like the Stoics, for example. Stoicism taught us that while we cannot control everything, we can choose how we respond to life. Epictetus, for example, believed in committing to a life of virtue, of focusing only on what's within our control. For Kierkegaard, and similarly, making a commitment involves saying, this is within my control and I'm going to invest myself in it. Now, the third part of it is passion. Kierkegaard believed that a life without passion was like a melody without a rhythm. Passion isn't about adrenaline or hype, it's about intensity, focus, and putting your whole self into something. He argued that to live meaningfully, we need that passion. That kind of comes with what we actually believe in what we're doing, what we're committed to. Passion fuels our actions and makes our choices feel more alive. It's that rare feeling of knowing you're on the right path even when it's difficult. All of this comes together in Kierkegaard's religious ideas, though he thought of it as a deeply personal spirituality. For him, God wasn't just an idea to analyze or a box to check. Believing in God was a radical and personal choice. Think of it like this. Rather than just believing God exists as a fact, Kierkegaard wanted people to believe passionately, as if their lives were built around this belief. He called this the leap of faith, which you very well may know of. It is not a passive acceptance, it's actually an active commitment. It's not a blind faith. To believe for Kierkegaard means living your life as if belief truly does matter. It's less about debating theology and more about orienting your life towards something higher, even when it's risky. In today's world, many of us feel so paralyzed by endless options and just non-stop information. We're bombarded by the highlights of other people's lives and the weight of so many what-ifs. Kierkegaard's message to us is that clarity doesn't come from knowing everything, it comes from just choosing something. Just like Plato's philosopher in the allegory of the cave who had to leave the cave to glimpse the truth. We have to make that leap ourselves. Our own lives will never have meaning if we're waiting for that perfect answer. So here's the challenge. First, refine your perception. What do you truly value? What in life seems worth fighting for and worth committing to? Then make the commitment. You might not feel ready, and that's okay. Decide to pursue something that resonates with what you've perceived. And finally, find that passion. Throw yourself into it, not in a surface level way, but with depth, intensity, and purpose. In a world where everything demands your attention, these 3 principles can help you find that path worth walking. And what's very intriguing about passion is that it's not always just this epiphany that unravels itself in the most clarifying way. Sometimes you have to learn about becoming passionate as you find yourself in the process of your commitments. That passion can manifest itself as a consequence of the commitments to becoming more of yourself and following that inherent curiosity over time. In the end, the choices that you're making are what's defining you in Kierkegaard's eyes. Kierkegaard and Plato both saw that to be fully alive is to pursue what's true and good, to find the direction in a world that offers endless detours. Let's give you that courage. Instead of finding the perfect answer, commit to the journey of becoming a person of perception, commitment, and passion. The world will keep shifting, but that's a choice that you can always hold on to. When the world seems unstable, become that source of stability. In an ideal personal world, wouldn't you prefer that you pursued the act of becoming rather than just being given the answers themselves? Isn't that where your character and sense of self is embodied? And make it fun, because the unknown will always be out there. That is absolutely inescapable. So instead, learn to embrace it and understand that when you're good to yourself, life will continue to work in your favor. So we've covered a lot: perception, commitment, and passion. But let's go a little bit deeper. How often do we really stop to question what drives us? It's easy to get swept up by the currents of other people's opinions or by friends that are here today and gone tomorrow. Kierkegaard might ask of us, what happens when we strip all of that away? What would your life look like if it were only defined by what you truly care about? It really is a profound question and not an easy one to answer. What if instead of asking, what should I do, we started asking, what would I be willing to devote myself to, even if no one else saw it, and even if it required so much sacrifice? This isn't just a hypothetical question, too. Kierkegaard believed that finding a true purpose often means discovering what we're willing to sacrifice for, because real commitment isn't always comfortable. It can be hard, messy, and scary. And here's something else to ponder. Are we afraid of commitment because we fear the consequences, or because we fear losing the freedom of endless options? In today's world, we're told we can do anything and be anything. But here's the paradox. When everything's an option, we end up feeling trapped by the very freedom we thought that would make us feel liberated. Kierkegaard knew this feeling well. He saw that modern life often pressures us to keep all doors open, but instead that life only gains meaning when we choose a door and actually walk through it. And modern, as in the 1800s, which is still quite relevant today, as you can see. Now again, let's think of Plato's forms. For Plato, each form, like truth, beauty, and justice, is something perfect that we can only glimpse through the shadows of our world. The question is, what ideals do you actually believe in? Is there an ideal we're striving for that makes you want to walk through that door, even if the journey is so difficult? In ancient Greece, philosophers like Socrates believed the unexamined life was not worth living. They argued that true freedom lies in examining our lives and in asking hard questions about what you truly believe. So here's another question for you. What, if anything, would you risk failing for? When Kierkegaard spoke of passion, he didn't just mean a fleeting enthusiasm. He meant the kind of deep investment that would make you willing to face failure and still keep going. He believed that true passion can only come from the choices you've committed to deeply, something you believe in so strongly that it's actually worth falling short of, learning, and then trying again. In a world that values success above all, this is a radical idea. Kierkegaard would follow up with, are you willing to choose something so meaningful that it shapes you? Because ultimately, it's not just about what you choose to do, it's about who you become through that choice. For Kierkegaard, that meant embracing another kind of inner spirituality, a personal relationship with what he saw as a higher truth, even if it meant standing apart from the crowds. So what's that one thing you would stand for even if no one else did? In all of this, Kierkegaard is urging us to stop drifting and just start directing. The ancient Greeks, like Plato, also pointed to the importance for aiming for ideals, even if those ideals seem just out of reach. They challenge us to ask ourselves, what do I ultimately seek in life? Is it pleasure, approval, knowledge, or is it something deeper and something more transcendent? The Greeks believed that the good life is one spent striving towards virtue, purpose, and truth. Kierkegaard would add that living well means making these ideals more personal, passionate, and active in our lives. Let's bring it all together again. Perception, commitment, and passion. These ideas are not easy to live by. They demand courage, honesty, and a willingness to step out of your comfort zone. But think about this question, even if it's common. What kind of life would you want to look back on when you're older? And what would the ideal version of you do in any given situation? Is it one where you're always in pursuit but just never arrived? Always overwhelmed by options but never actually making a decision? Or is it one where you choose to perceive deeply, to commit passionately, and to live with that fire that gives gives your life direction. That can only occur from making a decision and taking ownership and accountability of it. Kierkegaard has a funny line that goes something along the lines of, marry or don't, you'll regret both. It's funny because it highlights that's not so much about the outcome of the choices that are made, but about how you take accountability for those choices, which will be much more conducive to the experience you have overall. So in the end, Kierkegaard reminds us that a meaningful life doesn't come from finding all of the right answers. It comes from asking the right questions and daring to commit to the answers you do find. So as you go forward, I challenge you to ask yourself, what ideals am I pursuing? What am I willing to commit to? What, if anything, is worth my passion, my sacrifice, and my time? Because ultimately, the life that you build is the answer to these questions. Let me know what questions you've come up with to help direct your life, and subscribe if you want to continue these philosophical conversations. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next one.